That's a pen name.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. We are super excited to be here with Jayne Allen, and we're going to be talking about this beautiful book, Black Girls Exhausted. Mine is the version. It looks like
Oh yeah, this is the finished version with a note to remind me to bring my Vax card.
And we have hardcovers and paperbacks in the shop that have your beautiful book plates in them.
Beautiful. I'm so excited about that.
And they match the book cover. It was so awesome. So I
love that.
Off last week. So anybody who ordered them should be getting them like today or tomorrow.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I love that. I signed every single one with love. I loved doing that. So I'm so glad people are receiving theirs.
Thanks so much for signing them. That was really cool. And I could tell that they were all very deliberate.
Very intentional, yeah.
You'll see like the sloppier they get, the more they do. Yours didn't do that. There's a lot of care devoted to that.
There was.
So Jayne's going to chat with us after I introduce her, and then we're going to open for questions. I have a few questions prepared, but anyone else who has any questions, please type them in the chat window or use the fancy little ask a question button. I have the paperback link in the Buy Jayne's book little window on the bottom. And I'll also plug in the hardcover paperback cover link for everybody if you prefer that one. So, and either one will find with your book. So, please do ask questions, participate, tell us what you thought about the book if you read it. I don't think of any spoilers.
Yes.
All right. So, a little bit about Jayne. Jayne Allen is the pen name of John Seeley, a graduate of Duke University and Harvard Law School. An avid traveler, she speaks 3 languages and has visited 5 continents. Drawing from her unique experiences as an attorney and entrepreneur, she crafts trans-cultural stories that touch upon contemporary women's issues, such as workplace and career dynamic, race, fertility, modern relationships, and mental health awareness. Her writing echoes her desire to bring both multiculturalism and multidimensionality to a rich and colorful cast of characters inspired by the novel uncovered in everyday life. Black Girls Must Die Exhausted is his first novel, which she calls Epitaph of My Third. A proud native of Detroit, she currently lives in Los Angeles, and she actually moved to New York today, so she's joining us from there. Thank you so much for joining us, Jayne. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited, and I'm so excited to be joining on a trip to New York. So.
It's so exciting. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your book and what inspired you to write it?
I would love to. Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. Thank you for hosting me. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about my book this evening, Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. So I was inspired to write this book. It was around 2016. And in the environment, we were having a lot of political and social issues that started to bubble up around the time of the presidential election. And as a woman, and also as a Black woman, for me, there was just a lot of intersections, a lot of intersectionality, and it felt very heavy. And I really wanted to write a novel that would kind of examine the layers of experience that come along with Black womanhood, what the human experience is like with these societal layers of experience, and then celebrate, what happened, how you stay standing and how you still manage to thrive and find joy in the midst of these, obstacles and challenges and sometimes difficult experiences. And so that was where I got this idea. And I also felt like it was important in contemporary fiction because I really love kind of chick lit stories, where it's women's stories and it's kind of everyday, but with a twist, or everyday adventures. And you can kind of travel along on this journey with this kind of cool, quirky person who's trying to figure it all out. So I wanted to center a Black female protagonist and make that meaningful, and really not just make it about her appearance or just sort of cultural tidbits, but really examine who this person is and get to know her, and set her on a journey that it shows what race is like and what it feels like and what that experience is like, but it's not a story about that. It's about a woman who's trying to find fulfillment. And in this story, we meet Tabitha Walker. She's our protagonist. She's the star I picked for this story. And she is 33 years old, and she's been living her life according to a checklist. And she's thinking she's doing all the right things and she's got it figured out. And we meet her on her very worst day where all of that falls apart. She learns she has a reproductive health issue that starts to call into question things that she had taken for granted because she had been able to focus on her career and, do all of these other things. But now she has only 6 months to figure out what she's going to do about family. And it's completely out of the blue. So we join her on this journey as she has to now reconfigure her priorities and redefine for herself what fulfillment is, because this particular crisis just causes all the things she had buttoned up to unravel. So that's kind of the gist of the story. And it's a woman gets her self story regardless of who she winds up with. I mean, that's kind of the happy ending that I go for, is that, the woman ultimately gets herself and what fulfillment is. And I like crafting story that shows people seeking fulfillment in different ways. And so that's kind of the overview of the story. There's a lot of colorful characters. Tabby's grandmother happens to be a white woman, and she's had her own intersections with race because she married a Black man 2 generations back. And at that time, it was a very different landscape in the country, and that affected their family in various ways. So as you get into the book, that gets unpacked, and we explore that, and their relationship creates a foundation to make that exploration. So there's a lot of, it's a kind of using fiction to push the boundaries of everyday life a little bit further, and to do an examination and have a little everyday adventure for this character. Oh, I lost your audio. You might be on mute.
Sorry.
Okay.
I loved every moment of the book. I read it
Thank
in
you.
a couple of days. I was just utterly entranced.
I love that.
I loved Tabitha, and she was this very understandable, empathetic character that just made me wish I could know her from start.
Thank you.
Do you want to read any from the book?
Say that one more time. Oh, read some of the book? Sure. So I will read a section. So when I talk about using this book and fiction being a vehicle to push the boundaries of everyday life, again, Tabitha is the protagonist. She's a Black female. Her grandmother is a white female, and they have a beautiful relationship. It's very intimate and loving, and that's pretty much, for Tabitha, her closest family member, for reasons that you find out in the story, because her family is very complicated. And I won't call it fully dysfunctional, but like we all have some dysfunction in our families. Tabitha definitely has her share. And so she wound up spending a lot of her adolescence with her grandmother, and her grandma's kind of her safe place. So in the scene that I'm going to read, they wind up having this very deep conversation and touching conversation that is it's uncommon. And you when you think about it, you start to wonder, well, why don't we talk about this? But they ask each other, what does it feel like to experience the race that society has assigned to you? So this grandmother and granddaughter are coming from different perspectives and actually exchange perspectives in this space. And they've never thought to ask each other this before, and they've never thought to talk about it before. So that's where we're going to start. And I will, about how long do you want me to read for? Just a couple minutes?
Yeah, 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So I will. Okay. Sometimes I just read half of this, but I'm going to give both perspectives in this scene. And it's not a spoiler. So it's still, when you read the lead up and then you get to that, you'll still have all the same feelings.
I'm going to toggle off my video while you're reading, okay?
Okay. So this is the story is written from a first person perspective. So when you hear I, that's Tabitha's voice, and she's in the scene with her grandmother, and they're going to ask each other these questions. Granny Tab. Oh, and I'll tell you one more thing, that her grandmother, it's Granny Tab. They're both named Tabitha. So Tabitha, the protagonist, is named after her grandmother. Okay. Granny Tab, can I ask you a silly question? I asked, even though I already knew I could ask my grandmother anything. But this time, what I wanted to know felt foreign as a thought and strange coming from my lips. What does it feel like to be white? My grandmother absorbed my words, took a deep breath, took off her glasses, and squinted just a bit, which told me she was thinking. I've asked myself the same question on occasion. When I was reminded of it, most of the time by cruel people when I was with my son, your father, she said quickly, touching my knee. I look at him sometimes and look at me and wonder how we could live in a world that treated the two of us so differently. When he came from my own body, my skin color changed in the sun too, just like him, like yours, just not as dark. But believe me, I tried, she said with a smile, running her pale fingers soothingly across my golden brown arm. I try to think, was white a hair texture, a state of mind? I could never put my finger on it. Maybe it was just what we were told it was supposed to be, 'cause I never felt white. My grandmother shook her head softly before continuing. So the best I can tell you is that as I've experienced it, it's more of a what it's not than a what it is. I mean, I get reminded of being a woman all the time, but being white? She brought her hand to her face and gently rubbed her cheek. Sometimes when there's no friction, no reminder of what you can't do, it feels like a hole that needs to be filled with something, so desperately. Filled so there is a something. Your dad, then you, my grandchildren, you have been my greatest something. And I don't know that there is any more than that. We sat still for a moment after that, both of us contemplating her words. It was some time before she spoke again. I never thought to ask it of anyone, not even your dad, whose whole life I watched. Yours too. I guess I thought I understood from observation. It had never occurred to me how silly that might be not to ask until just now. I reckon I should ask you too. What does it feel like to be black? Do you consider yourself black? I laughed a bit in answering. I don't think I have much of a choice, Granny Tab, I said with a smile. To consider myself black or not black, I mean, society just looks at me and sees a black woman, no matter what I have to say about it. I suppose you're right too, Granny Tab said pensively. How does it feel? I continued, trying to think and still talk. I'd honestly never considered the question before, not while living it. I can tell you that your thought about it being exhausting, that sounds about right sometimes. A lot of times it does feel exhausting because everything bad in society is about you, but when it comes to the good, nothing is for you. I feel like I'm not enough and too much, all at the same time. And then other times, being black feels exhilarating because every good thing that happens feels like a victory, even the small things, because you're constantly reminded that you're an other. So, whatever good happened in spite of. So there's celebration, there's joy. I paused just to think. It felt so complicated. I pushed myself to find more in the deeper parts, hidden in the folds of my spirit, the secrets. And sometimes an emptiness is there too, a different kind from what you described, though, a need for validation, maybe to be seen, approved of, to matter as an individual, not just a monolith, and a desire to know that if I do follow all the rules, that I get the promise on the other side, just like anyone else. And by anyone else, I mean anyone else who is white. So that's the scene between Tabby and her grandmother.
I love that.
Thank you.
It was very touching and also just interesting to hear a conversation, like you said, that doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
And her grandmother says something else in a different, I think it's a different conversation. That's actually the title of the book.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Did someone once say that to you, or is that a common expression, or how did you come up with that as a title?
So it's completely came up with it as the title, specifically for the title. And when I came up with the title, I wanted to find a title that sounded like you'd heard it before once you heard it. Like somebody has to have said this, before, because I wanted to encompass a kernel of truth in it, and to make it be something that was thought provoking and that told its own story just from the title alone. And so that was where this title came about. And the core of it was this word exhausted. And that was kind of the feeling that I was feeling at the time. And I felt like it was an acknowledgement of the weight of the experience, just the different layers. And anybody, I think, can relate to that in various ways, because we all carry various layers of our experience. And once you start to unpack it, there is that feeling. And so I wanted to acknowledge that, and from the perspective of a Black woman. And then also about the perspective of life, because the story has these various generations in it, where Tabitha has the benefit of generational wisdom. Her grandmother plays a very significant part of the story. And you don't really see a lot of that in contemporary fiction, where there's that very substantial presence of a character of another generation. And also Ms. Gretchen, who's Granny Tab's best friend. And just I loved having that. And what they provide for Tabitha is a lifetime of perspective that she hasn't lived yet. So you can think about the span of a lifetime. And for Tabitha, the word that she realizes at the very beginning of the story that she's been living is exhausted in so many ways. And she has this opportunities so young to, with the benefit of perspective, recast that word for herself. And so by the end of the story, it's something else, and it means something else. And that was what I wanted to do with the journey of this title. It means different things at different points of the story. And in the end, it has a completely different meaning than what on the surface. And you wouldn't know that meaning until you read the book. But once you've read the book, then there's a different meaning to the title. So I loved being able to do that through story, and just kind of have this inside thing between me and readers that we know what this means. So I'm so excited for everybody to read the book and to take that journey with the meaning of the title. But that was kind of how it originated, and my thinking, and how it played in. And yes, Tabby's grandmother, the saying comes from Tabby's grandmother. And it's one of her observation based on the life that she led, and something that you find out in the story, one of her friends, and the experience that she had with one of her best friends growing up. So so it's meant to be meaningful. But just even if you haven't experienced any of the story, the title is meant to just kind of give you a seed of something substantial, to know that this is a meaty story and it's substantive.
It is, and you did exactly what you set out to the title, because it was a thing that I was like, what sounds like something I should have heard at some point.
Right.
And the beautiful meaning of it that comes at the end, I just love that. When I looked at the title of the book, I was like, it sounds like it might be a depressing book.
Yeah.
And it is like you travel through a lot of exhaustion with Tabitha, but it's not a depressing book at all.
Oh, no. And I think that's the journey of it. Thank you. Yes, I think but it's kind of, this is like life, when you have challenges, and there are the ups and downs, but you don't have one without the other. And so I wanted this to feel like a kind of journey through a real life, where you really get to know this person, and you really are going along with her, and you can really celebrate the ups, and you can understand the downs. But I definitely thought about the flow of the story, and crafting it. So I know where the emotional notes are, and, I want to bring the highs and, not too low. There's some lows, but that's her story. And I wanted it to feel real and authentic for the reader. So I wanted you to, finish the book and be like, ooh, that was quite a ride, and I feel great.
Now we need to read the next one.
Yes.
Susan just said, I registered for this event on the strength of the magnificent title.
Oh, thank you so much, Susan. I love that.
Speaking about crafting the book, there is an audience member question. How long has the book lived inside you, Christina?
Well, I think that the story, when I was in my 30s, I went through a fertility issue, infertility, and I also had to go through family planning issues. I'm not married. I hadn't gotten married, and I had to decide, okay, how am I going to preserve my options? And I had to figure all of that out myself in my late 30s. And even when I went to go look for resources, there was like just a handful of books. It wasn't really a topic that people talked about openly. And it just opened this door to this whole universe of experience. I was like, oh my gosh, there's all these people like this. It's this whole world of terminology and it's an economic issue that I wish I had known. I mean, a lot of times you're doing egg freezing or, things where you're preserving options, regardless of what you ultimately decide you want to do. If you are going to afford yourself a decision, you have to actually pay out of pocket, or unless there's like an insurance policy, or something that an employer may or may not provide. I wish somebody had just brought that issue to my attention when I was in my early 30s. I wish I didn't even know that. So there was this whole world. And when I thought about, gosh, what kind of story do I want to write? I wanted to do things that you don't normally see. I wanted to use fiction to kind of push the boundaries and open up worlds in everyday life, like kind of what you read in my bio. Because I'm like, wow, there's all this hidden stuff like right in front of us. So with this, that started to bubble inside me when I was going through that. And I thought, wow, there's all these people, there's all these women and men and couples. But it's definitely an issue that obviously impacts women quite substantially when we talk about fertility. And not enough people are talking about this, and there's not enough information. So I really wanted to kind of highlight that, make that something that was brought awareness if I was going to do something in fiction to try to bring awareness to this. So that was living in me for almost 10 years before I started writing. And so then when I started thinking, okay, I want to write a novel, and I thought, what do I want to show people? And I thought, wow, I think I can do this. Like, I think I can take my experience as a Black woman and use fiction to really unpack these hidden places that I've gotten to see and really unpack the inside of the human experience of what it feels like, to do this as a woman, to do this as a Black woman, to go through and, try to manage through career and all of these things. And, I could really kind of look at my 30s as a completed decade. So I started writing this like right at the cusp of 40. So that's how long it lived inside me. And it just was quite a journey bringing it to fruition and bringing Tabitha to life. I thought of my character. I did a lot of character development. I think I went overboard. I have backstories for all my characters. Generations back, everything that they do, I know why they did it, what happened that caused them to think like this and make this decision, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. I had such a ball with that. So yes, I cast my characters kind of how I thought of myself as like a casting director, and like who would need to take this, who would need to be cast or who would need to be the protagonist to take this particular journey, and then who would the supporting characters need to be to kind of juxtapose and show different sides of this character and this path. So yeah, I'm just unpacking the process a little bit. If anybody has other questions about it, I'm happy to answer. It was really a joy to do.
I love that each character kind of had, it was about Tabitha's kind of consistent issues, but you also bring to light other people's daily dramas and concerns, and you touch on so many topics that all of us see all the time and don't necessarily think about. Like a friend with a mental health issue and her reaction to it, and a friend with a marital issue and her reaction to it, and her relationship with her dad, and all of these things that so many people deal with but feel like they can't talk about. Was there any reason or thing that inspired you to focus or light those particular issues?
I think they're a part of life, you know. So I think, you know, if I could do a service through fiction is kind of help people look at their own life. Like I when I started writing, I was, and still to this day, had a lot of time constraints, and I didn't find myself reading as much as I wanted to, and I felt like I wanted to give more than just kind of an escape. I wanted to give like an experience and something that could really give you something for your own life, that, you know, your life would be better. Like if I, you know, that's ambitious, and I don't know if it actually turned out to be that, but that was what I wanted. I wanted to give a fiction experience that would actually make your life better, you know, some kind of way. Like you'd enjoy it and it would be a great experience. It'd be entertainment and completely entertaining, but you would also walk away from like, wait, my life is also better, you know? And so to do that, I was like, well, maybe I can, you know, be as authentic as possible and push these characters, you know, as far as I can, to explore further than what we might do in our own life, and then maybe that can show us something that can teach us and we can actually use it in our own lives. So that was why I did all the character development, because I, you know, how they react and respond and make choices needed to be authentic, and so I really had to think about that, to, you know, achieve that objective that I was going for with this. And everybody has a secret, you know, and that's kind of how it is. It's like we have the person that we show everyone, and then there's a part of us that we're protecting because it's vulnerable, or, you know, but we need support in those areas, whether it's, you know, mental health, whether it's you know, relational issues, whether it's fertility and reproductive health. Those are all things that, or career, you know, one character is having career issues and not telling people. And, you know, so that's what happens. And it's just like, okay, well, let's examine this and see how this can play out differently. So that was a lot of fun. So it wasn't intentional. I wasn't like, okay, here's my list of issues. It was more like, let me make these people complex, and let's, you know, make them authentic and authentically complex. And another thing that I did was I kind of thought about this as a mystery, like a mystery of humanity. Like I wanted it to be a book that you could read more than once and find different things on another read. You know, I drop little clues in, you know, why somebody, like there's certain surprises that happen, but there were clues along the way. Just like in normal life, we miss things with people, and that's kind of, the characters are missing things. There's, you know, little clues along the way, and then you get there. So I wanted it to be something you could reread and say, oh, you know, oh yeah, that she did say that, or, you know. So I wanted it to just be a fun experience, all told.
I love that. I also have a question about Tabitha's character. Her sense of drive, especially career associated, and like the way she has a checklist and stuff. I don't want to directly ask if that's autobiographical, but did you draw that from a particular life experience?
It's definitely from my 30s. I feel like myself and a lot of the women that I am friends with and just know, and I think a lot of contemporary society, we're in the professional space. It's not necessarily exact, you know, checklist per se, but it's a checklist kind of life. Like it's this thing where you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, you're supposed to do this, and that's what you're told that fulfillment looks like on the other side of it. And then like getting into my 30s and going through it and then realizing, wait a minute, that's not the recipe for fulfillment. You know, that's not the, you know, that's not it, you know. So having to get off that checklist and thinking about that. So for me, it's Tabitha, was more like Tabitha in my 30s, very much less like Tabitha. Hopefully getting more like Miss Gretchen as I get older.
Awesome. Gretchen is the best.
I loved writing her as a character.
So another question I have kind of about her job is, part of that job is because she's a Black woman and she has more hurdles to overcome than her colleagues that are not Black women. The other women that are there kind of have a little bit of an understanding of that, but they acknowledge it's that much more difficult for her, which I found really wonderful, and especially like Lisa and a couple of other characters. And then her boss kind of directly addresses that at one point. Is that, I forgot exactly how I was going to ask that. Her first reaction to that conversation is not positive at all.
Yeah.
But the other people around her kind of encourage her to accept that that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So do you think that difficulty in her career inspires her or holds her back?
I think it's probably a little bit of both, and trying to write for Tabitha, I think she had some insecurities that I didn't have professionally, but I think a lot of people do have those. And I think it makes for a more interesting character and story. Of course, it can't be totally formed. They have to have, some things that hold them back because they've got to go through a journey of kind of figuring it out. And I think for Tabitha, it was something that was important to show, just for her being a woman and a Black woman, the imposter syndrome element of it, because a lot of times in these spaces, we have to make space for ourselves, and we have to make space, and we're told we have to make space, and then we're not necessarily protected in making that space or supported. So with Tabitha, I wanted to kind of show that, and then also what it can look like to be supported and not be supported, to be not protected and to be supported, and how that kind of comes together, and how she ultimately has, finds her way in that space, or has to work to figure that out, and how challenging that is on top of everything else. But I just think it was so interesting to unpack that and think about it, because it wasn't even really something that I thought about in my professional career so much before I started writing this. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of think about this and see it through all kinds of different eyes and perspectives. So for Tabitha, there is no right answer, and she's trying to get more information from different perspectives to figure out how to interpret this very cryptic experience that she's having with her boss, who's like, it seems like he's on her side, but then it doesn't, and it's just so unclear. But so that just it makes for a challenge for her, that she's got to figure her way through, but she's got help and support. So
yeah, she never really kind of tells us how she comes to feel about it. It seems like she just accepts it and basically achieves what she set out to, which is incredible with that particular issue and the way boss talked to her. I was like, I don't even know how to take that. So there's just a lot to talk about in this book. There's so many conversations that make you think about it, and like some of the conversations about how she wishes she could wear her hair natural at work, and then you have other conversations about police and how scared she is of them. Another question I wanted to ask about that was, is that one of the issues that you very purposefully brought to light, or did that just kind of come out as you were writing the story?
I thought it needed to be part of the fabric of her experience. I think that we hear a lot about the issues on television, like George Floyd, and we hear about it as something that happened in retrospect. But and we see the experience that happened to these individual people who we can name, George Floyd and Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland, and we see it play out. But for people who are at risk and seemingly at risk in the same ways of kind of having something happen that they don't know how or why this could happen to them, and it's an unjust development that could happen. There's a weight that is carried, like, and it's in various degrees. I mean, everybody doesn't feel like Tabitha, and everybody, and some people maybe brush it off, but there's still that weight, this uncertainty, this unknowing of, about your personal safety, and like, and undeservedly so, in certain respects, because there's just no clear explanation, and we all, I think, for that feeling of comfort and safety and security, want a clear explanation, and there's not a clear explanation. So I think, just in trying to show the layers of experience for her, it's not so much about anything more than the internal space and what she's feeling and going through, and the weight that's created on just a person on an everyday basis, and what that might feel like and what that might be like. So, for Tabitha, and I'll give you an example from that scene. And I don't want to give away a spoiler, but there is an interaction that Tabitha has with a police officer, a law enforcement officer, in the very beginning of the book. And I sent that to one of my friends, and she's a writer. She lives in Germany. She's a French-German woman, and she's married to a woman. And she writes me back. I sent her the first chapter. I didn't say anything. I was just like, "Can you read this? I'm writing a novel. I've never written a novel before. What do you think about this?" And she wrote back, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, is this how Black people feel in America?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I don't know for all Black people, but just, unpack for me what you're asking or what you mean." And she's like, "Well, of course I don't know what it feels like to be Black, and I don't have a direct reference point for what that scene represented, but what it evoked in me was how I felt and how I feel when I'm, like, walking with my wife, and we decide if we have to decide, are we gonna hold hands, or are we gonna display the nature of our relationship? Because if we do, then we know that there is a risk of, assault or something happening to us that we won't know where it's coming from, or it's not deserved, but we don't have an explanation. We don't know, we can't pinpoint the circumstances of how or why or what. We just know that risk becomes, present at that point. So we have to make those decisions about that. And she's like, and that feeling is what it evoked for me reading that. And I was like, yes, that's right. And it made me realize that on a human level, we can absolutely relate to each other, as long as we're looking at it as from the perspective of how does it feel, like what's happening on the inside to this person based on all these layers of experience. So I'm hoping that this can be a way to talk about things that we actually have more in common than we realize.
That's wonderful. And I love the perspective of your friend in that as well. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to give you a shout out. If anybody else in the audience has a question, just jump in. Put it in the ask question button or the chat window. Christine knows this great so far. I have a lighter question for you.
Yes.
It was about, oh shoot, I just forgot it. It was really fun.
Was it Ms. Gretchen?
Yeah, it was how you came up with the retirement communities dynamic.
Oh yeah. Well, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother in assisted living facilities. And again, it was just another world that I got to see that I feel like isn't, is part of everyday life, but is kind of hidden. We don't see it very much. We don't read about it, but it could be its own drama, its own, like, sitcom, or, like the things that happen, the people say what they really think, it was such an interesting world to visit and be a part of. And it gave me so much perspective for my life, because what I'd ask myself when I'd go and visit my grandmother, I'd see people, sitting, and I'm like, what are they thinking about? I wonder, at this stage of life, and, their life has gotten pretty small at this point. And I'm like, I wonder what they're thinking about. I'm like, I know what they're not thinking about. I'm like, I don't think they're regretting like that party they went to, or like the night they drank too much, or whatever, or, that wild girls trip weekend or something, So that just like gave me so much perspective for life for me in my 30s, that like, there's going to be a time where you have fewer options. So you better make all this count, So that was kind of what, and then like, who are these people? Like, these people are treasures for us. They've lived so much life. They've learned all these lessons that we have in front of us. I'm like, what can we learn from these people that have all this road under their feet? So that was why it was just so fun to me to bring this, this perspective and this wisdom and these characters into the story in a substantive way, because they lend so much to Tabitha and in terms of perspective, and make her life richer. So that was where the inspiration came from.
Thank you. Yeah, Miss Question and Grandma Tabitha. My other question was about Tabitha's career. How did you decide that was going to be what her career was going to be? It's a little bit different from your career.
Oh, yes, very different. But I've had some overlaps with communication, so I kind of know the world, but it's not my professional world. But when I was, like I said, I was thinking about with the story, like a casting director a little bit, thinking, oh, for this story and this journey and what I want to show, what does she needs to have a certain kind of job, and with her being on broadcast television, the societal, judgments and impositions get amplified. So we get to, with Tabitha, she gets to be someone where we can really see it on a bigger scale and unpack it and view it more easily than, like, I think it's not as amplified for some different careers or different people, but for her, it's the societal voice is like the voice of the audience, and they're the judge of everything, so it allowed for that. And then her job is also to see, and this book kind of lets us see like the human story here and the experience, and her job is to find human stories and see stories within humanity that may be missed and overlooked, and bring them onto the news. So so that was another thing, that she's this perfect vehicle for the reader, because that's her job, is to see. And then she's also experiencing this amplified societal kind of constraints and judgment. So it kind of fit, but it took a while to figure out what her job was supposed to be for this story. So it was kind of like the perfect fit for her in this.
It worked in perfectly, and it enabled this wonderful conversation with her stylist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, kept trying to get her to do something crazy with her, or just more exciting than she's done. And she was like, "No, I have to look this way for the class. I can't do all those things. I can't wear my hair natural." And how wistful he was about that was distressing.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I mean, I think this is like a story of a woman finding her courage, and seeking authenticity. And I think that is a, common story, regardless of your background or how you define yourself, or how society defines you. I think that in these times, especially, we're looking for that, and we're all kind of seeking authenticity in various ways, on the spectrum of a little bit more to a lot more. So I love that Tabitha can kind of be this person having a representative journey in that way.
I have a couple questions from the audience, if you don't mind.
Sure. No, love it.
I love the Sunbeam Susan. Since this is your first novel, can you speak about your path to publication?
Sure. So the path to publication was very interesting. I crafted the story, I wrote the manuscript, and I had wonderful group of beta readers as friends. Very, very busy people that carved out time to do this for me. And, they gave me great feedback, which was really encouraging. And I think when you're starting out, you haven't done something before, especially as a writer, there's all these questions about, is it good enough? Am I good enough? Are people going to like it? Will people read it? Will people read any of it? And so to get that was really encouraging. And my dad was an encourager, and he read the manuscript and was like, you got to try to get a publishing deal. You need to have the support and a platform or publisher. So I went to agents, to try to get on that pathway. And I thought, okay, these are agents that represented, Black stories or other Black writers or contemporary fiction, because I just feel like this is contemporary fiction with a cultural perspective, not that different from like what Kevin Kwan does, So I was like, this is, there's all these possible intersections. And the feedback I got was not about the story or the writing. It was that they didn't, they said, I couldn't connect to your protagonist, or I don't feel like she's relatable or the story is relatable. And I said, wait a minute, like what? Like Tabby? And so I was like, no, that doesn't sound right. And I was like, are you projecting onto the audience, like readers? I think you're underestimating them. Like I was like, the readers are being underestimated. Like I have much more faith in what readers are ready for. And like, you don't have to be Black to connect to Tabby, like she's a human being. And no, that I just didn't believe that. So in order for that not to be the last word, I decided that I had to self-publish because I wanted to get it into the hands of readers and let readers prove me right. Because I was like, no. I know that readers are ready for this, and no, like that just didn't even seem right. So it was challenging. I had to do it with my own resources, but I did the best I could. I put the book out, and it wound up, readers just started coming to it, and over time and reviews started to build up, and it was just really an incredible journey. And I feel like this whole thing has been a collaboration between me and readers. And ultimately in 2020, because we were all, at home in quarantine, I had speaking engagements, they had gotten canceled, but I really wanted to still connect with readers. So I wound up doing book clubs. I said, any book club, if you're reading my book, I will make myself available virtually. I will come to your book club. It turned into over 60 book clubs across 5 continents during 2020. And it was through the book club experience. One of the women who organized the book club introduced me to my agent, who ultimately I met with her the next day. She's like, okay, this is unconventional. This is unusual for a publisher to take on something and do a new edition of something that's been previously like self-published. She's like, but I just get this story. And I think that there's a publisher that will get it. And she brought my book to the Harper Perennial team at HarperCollins. They're amazing. And so we wound up with a 4-book deal with them. So this is the Harper Perennial edition. I had an amazing experience with my editor, Sarah Reed, to really get a chance to recraft. Because I look at the book as an experience. Like I want the words to fall away and you go on a ride. And like, then you just look up and you're like, oh my gosh, and feel transported in this space and, with these people that should feel real to you. Like the whole thing should feel real until the very last page. And so I really got an opportunity to recraft that experience and just, to precision and in a way of just nothing was done but making it better and improvements. I was so thrilled with that. So that's where we are today. That's how we got there. It was really a journey with me and readers. And I'm just glad that my bets paid off, and hopefully readers' bets on this story and on me have paid off. And I'm super excited about where all this is going to go.
That's one of the most successful publication stories I've ever heard. It's so unusual to get. I have a certificate in publishing, and they pretty much tell us that if you ever self-publish something, then you don't get picked up.
Yeah, right.
Even for future books, like once you self-publish something, you're kind of done. So that is so impressive. And
right.
What do you do to just your incredible connection with people? they saw that, and the book is relatable for everyone. It's something that
Thank you. I
everyone.
believe that. And it was so, I mean, and as a writer, and I think if there are people listening who are writers, and that's why I try to be transparent about this, there are so many questions that you have about your abilities and yourself. There's a day by day, every day, it's like you sit and you write and you're like, oh my God, is this crap? Like that's, or is it good? And you don't know, and you won't know until it's in the hands of readers, because it is such a collaboration. But what I did know was, in this space, I was writing a human story the whole time. And yes, my protagonist happened to be a Black woman. And yes, like these layers crafted what her experience perspective was. But at the end of the day, I was so clear about that. And I believed in the humanity of the readership and the audience as well. And so there's just nothing that, that space could tell me that this wouldn't be relatable. And yes, it's so uncommon for a publisher to come on board in this way, and especially with a multi-book deal like this. But they've been so supportive, and I think they understood and saw the vision and where this could go. And I think creating this space for readers, and to just hopefully start these conversations, and if this book can be a spark for that, and to do something positive, then great. And I'm so glad to have them as a partner to do it. So yeah, it's unusual story. So I'm glad that you asked that, so that people know it is not the conventional way.
I am so happy for you, though, especially
Thank
that
you.
they got more books on board. So we
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's a couple more questions. What is the story behind the pen name? Is it an alter ego, or is it symbolic to you?
A little bit of both. So I had never written fiction before, and I had kind of a very traditional job. And I was like, well, I really want to just be authentic to what I want to write. And I did not have very much experience being an artist, and that way I have a background in law, and it's just like kind of the most conservative, path that you could take. So there's a lot of editing and censoring. And I was like, no, I really need to create a space for myself where I can just do what I want to do and not be afraid, and just put it out and make artistic decisions. And so because I didn't feel like I could do that in the constraints that I was living in, I made a space for myself. And so that's Jayne Allen. And so my name is, Janique Seeley. My middle name is Aline. And so it was a name that's close enough to my name that it's like, I feel like it's a nickname, but it's also a space. It's like a space I created for myself to do what I was too afraid to do, I guess. But so now I like it. So it's for it allows me to push the boundaries with fiction, and to remind myself that this is my space to be an artist, and to just find authenticity, and try to take it as far as I can go.
I absolutely love the way you describe that as making a space for yourself. That is so awesome. And it reminds me of Tabitha. She just admire her and for you and your story about how this all came about, including your fiction. You just decided you were going to do it, and it worked, and that's awesome.
Thank you.
There's a question from Susan about the self-publication process, which I'm pretty sure it did, but she asked if the title stays the same between publications. Okay.
The title for the first book. Now, the second book, we have a new title. The second book, which I can share, is Black Girls Must Be Magic. That is book 2, and that's out in February. So, and then third book will be TBD, but it will be a completely new title. So we did change that, but we kept the title for the first book the same. Thank you, Susan.
So, have you already written the second book and self-published that as well? Or
yes. So much more limited than the first book. I was so busy. So I was so busy with my my other self and my job, and like time wise, I just I wanted to get the second book done and out, and life was taking over, and I was like, oh, it's coming. And so, but readers were like, we want this book. So I wound up just like kind of pushing myself to finish, and I put it out, and I didn't do like hardly any of the I didn't have time to market and print. I was like, well, here's the book. If you're looking for it, you'll find it. But so with this, the new edition of that, we have a new edition of book 2 in February. So I had a chance to revisit it, rewrite it, add scenes, and completely kind of redo that. So that was really, really cool. And the third book is just going to be the grand finale, and I'm in the process of writing that right now. I'm so excited about that as well. So, and then we have another book too. So we will be doing this for a while.
So I don't know if this is a giveaway of something or not. Are all of the books the same character?
More or less. There are new characters that get added. There are characters that go their own way. There are characters that are not as prevalent in some one story or one book versus another. So it's really like I really tried to make these characters 3-dimensional, and like the texture of real human texture. So there's in the second book, there's one character you don't really see them that much. So a couple. So that's life. People are, but why, and they're working on some things, and so I really wanted this to kind of be a series that you're really journeying along with these people who are actually evolving and changing and trying things and doing things and growing in ways that are interesting and that you could like learn from. So that was the goal.
Absolutely. Oh, well, I can't wait for right now. Because this was like satisfying, but definitely made you want to read this.
Good. That's about. I was like, I don't want people to be mad at me. I
was like,
there's so much more.
I'm glad there's another one.
Yeah.
So I put Jayne's website in the chat. So keep up with her and what she's working on and where her books are at. There's also links to buy the signed copies from our shop. And remember, this and they're
oh, thank you. Yay.
I love the cover so much.
Thank you.
So
I'm so excited about that. And I love the book plates. I spent like an hour trying to figure out how to match the Sharpie color to the book plate.
I love that. They were perfect.
Thank you. Yeah.
I get book plates at least once a week, and I was like, wow, these are really like there was like human care in these. And I made sure they were perfectly straight in all the books.
Thank you. That's so nice. I appreciate that. I was like, okay, this needs to be. I spent so much. I just loved it though, because I was thinking like, okay, this is gonna go to readers. Like, I want this to be a good experience. So like, let me make sure my penmanship is good. But
well, we loved it. So I think we're about at an hour. Do you have anything else you really wanted to chat about? Or?
I think we covered a lot, and I hope people just enjoy this book. It was a real joy and pleasure for me to write it, and I hope that it sparks joy and creates a wonderful reading experience and great conversation. And thank you so much for having me. I think this has been fun for me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the book and unpack it a bit and do a little reading. So thanks to everyone for attending, and I appreciate you. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're hanging out with me and us doing this. So thank you.
Well, we really appreciate having you and for you taking the time. I know your day was crazy. For the fact that you drove all the way to another office for good lighting. And to join us after your flight was just so special, and we're honored to have you. And we're honored to have your book at the shop. So I can't wait for people to come in and keep buying it.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope you have a good night and get some rest.
Thank you.
Everybody, again, thank you for being here and for asking great questions. And you had a really great time.
Fantastic time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.